Do you want to learn English? If yes, then watch this video until the very end because it will truly help you understand English better than before. Today, I will tell you a quiet story that will slowly break your heart before it gently puts it back together. Piece by Careful Piece. My name is Claire Donovan. I am 34 years old. I teach English at a public high school in Richmond, Virginia, and I love my work deeply. I grew up in a small rented house on the edge of town, raised by a single mother who cleaned offices to keep us fed. We never had much money. I wore my cousin's old clothes to school every day. I studied by streetlights sometimes when our electricity got shut off completely. Teaching became my whole life eventually. I poured everything into my students, especially the quiet ones, the ones who reminded me of myself at 17. 10 years ago, one of those students was a boy named Owen Pierce, 17 years old, always sitting quietly in the back of my classroom. Owen rarely spoke in class. He wrote beautiful essays though, thoughtful and careful, always handed in a day early, always neatly folded at the corners. I remember encouraging him once, quietly, after class one day, telling him his writing had a rare kind of honesty most adults never learn to have. He looked at me like nobody had ever told him that before. Then he simply nodded and walked out without saying another word that day. He graduated that spring quietly. I moved to a different school the following year. I never expected to think about him again after that at all. 10 years passed quickly, the way years always seem to do when you are busy grading papers and quietly building an ordinary life around teaching. Last month, a letter arrived quietly at my new school, forwarded twice through old district records before finally reaching my mailbox on a Tuesday morning. The handwriting looked neat and oddly familiar somehow, though I could not immediately place it. I opened it slowly, curious, standing at the mailroom counter. It was from Owen Pierce. He thanked me for something he said changed the direction of his entire life, though he never explained exactly what. The letter felt warm and strange all at once, full of gratitude but also something else. Something careful, like he was choosing every single word. At the very end, he asked if I would be willing to meet him in person, saying there was something he needed to say properly. I sat with that letter for 3 full days, unsure exactly what to feel, unsure why a former student would write something so oddly personal. Curiosity won eventually over caution. I wrote back, agreeing to meet him at a small coffee shop downtown the following Saturday afternoon at 2 o'clock. I told myself it was nothing unusual at all. Former students reach out sometimes. Teachers matter to people more than we often realize at the time. But something about that letter stayed with me all week long. A quiet, nervous feeling I could not entirely explain to myself or anyone else. Saturday came. I arrived early, sitting near the window, watching the door every time it opened, feeling strangely nervous for no clear reason at all. Owen walked in exactly on time. He was no longer 17. He was 27 now, tall, composed, wearing a plain gray sweater and quiet confidence. "Miss Donovan," he said softly, extending his hand politely toward me. "Thank you for coming. I was not sure you would remember me at all." "Of course I remember you," I said, smiling despite my nerves. "Your essays were some of the best I ever read in 20 years of teaching." We talked for almost an hour about ordinary things, his college years, his work, the town. Careful conversation circling something neither of us named yet. He was different from other men I had met, gentle in how he listened, careful never to interrupt, genuinely curious about my answers, not performing politeness. He complimented me only once, quietly, almost shyly, saying softly, "You still explain things the way you did back then, patient, like everyone deserves understanding." I felt my face grow warm. I brushed it off, changing the subject quickly, unsure why his simple words affected me more than they should have. Near the end of our coffee, he grew quieter, turning his cup slowly in his hands, clearly working towards something he had planned to say. "I have something I need to tell you," he said finally, his voice steady but careful. I have waited a long time to say this properly. My heart started beating much faster right then, unsure what direction this whole conversation was about to take, unsure whether to feel nervous or curious. When I was 17, he said slowly and carefully, "You were the only adult who ever made me feel like my thoughts actually mattered to someone. I never told you this back then because it would have been wrong to, and because I was a child and you were my teacher. But somewhere along the way, admiration turned into something deeper. I did not act on it. I waited, quietly, for years until it made sense. I sat there frozen, unsure what to say, my coffee going cold between my hands, my mind racing through 10 years of memories all at once. I'm 27 now," he continued gently. "You are 34. There is nothing inappropriate about this anymore. I made sure of that, deliberately. I am not asking for anything you are not ready to give," he said. "I only wanted you to finally know the truth, honestly, completely." I did not know exactly how to respond. Part of me wanted to run away. Part of me wanted to stay in that chair forever, listening. "Why now?" I finally asked quietly, my voice smaller than I expected it to be, my hands still trembling slightly around my cooling coffee cup. "Because waiting any longer felt like cowardice," he said simply. "And because I finally built a life I felt was worthy of asking you properly." I did not know then exactly what worthy meant to him. I assumed he simply meant emotional readiness, maturity, patience earned through all those quiet years. We started seeing each other slowly after that, careful and respectful, both of us cautious, both of us aware how strange our history could seem. He never rushed anything. He opened doors, remembered small details I mentioned once, and never once made me feel pressured towards something I wasn't ready for. He complimented my mind far more than my appearance. Though when he did mention my appearance, it always felt sincere, never performative, never empty flattery. "You have the kind of beauty that comes from kindness," he told me once. "It shows in how you speak to people who feel invisible." 6 months into our relationship, I noticed small, strange details I could not quite explain. Things that did not match a modest young man's ordinary life. His watch was simple, but clearly expensive. His apartment, though modestly furnished, sat in a building I knew charged rent higher than my entire salary. I asked him once gently what exactly he did for work these days. He smiled and said, "Investments, mostly." Nothing very exciting to talk about, honestly. I let it go, telling myself it did not matter. I had grown up poor. I judged people by character, not by bank accounts or appearances. One evening, nearly a year after that first letter, Owen took me to dinner and grew quiet again, the same way he had at that coffee shop. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small velvet box. His hands slightly unsteady for the first time since I had known him. "Claire," he said very carefully and slowly, "I have loved you since I was 17 years old, quietly, patiently, without ever expecting anything back from you. I built my entire life partly hoping that one day I would be someone you could love without any doubt or hesitation standing between us. Will you marry me?" He asked simply and quietly, no grand show, no crowd, no elaborate performance. Just his steady hands and his honest, careful voice. I said yes right there before I had even finished processing the question. Tears already falling before I understood exactly what I was agreeing to. It was only during our wedding planning that the full truth finally surfaced. Delivered gently by his sister over coffee one quiet afternoon together downtown. Owen was not simply comfortable. He was a billionaire, having built and sold a technology company quietly, avoiding headlines and public attention entirely on purpose. He'd kept it hidden deliberately, wanting me to love him for exactly who he was, not for anything money could ever buy or fake. When I confronted him gently that night, he took both my hands and said, "I needed to know you would have chosen me either way. Money can buy comfort," he said very quietly, "but it cannot buy someone choosing you honestly, without knowing what you could offer them in return." I married Owen Pierce 6 weeks later. In a small ceremony he insisted on keeping modest. Exactly the kind of wedding I once dreamed about. I think about that folded letter often, sitting now in a drawer beside my wedding ring. Proof that patience and honesty outlast almost everything else. Age was never truly the barrier people assumed it was. Respect was the real foundation, built quietly over 10 patient years, one honest choice at a time. If you understood every single phrase in this story, from beginning to end, that means your English has grown stronger than you probably realize.